Welcome to my book review for Education 407, Technology and Digital Literacy. So part one's my introduction. So the book I decided to pick was Learning First, Technology Second, The Educator's Guide to Designing Authentic Lessons by Liz Kolb, which was published in the year of 2017. So I also wanted to give some information about the author. So the author, Liz Kolb, pictured on the slide, actually works at the University of Michigan. She's a clinical assistant professor of educational technology there, and she teaches a wide variety of courses, from master's and certification programs to even technology for primary and secondary education. She also is a keynote speaker in both the US and Canada, and she's written many books. Some of these books include Toys to Tools, Connecting Student Cell Phones to Education, which was published by ISTE in 2008, Cell Phones in the Classroom, A Practical Guide for the K-12 Educator, also published by ISTE, but in 2011, Help Your Child Learn with Their Cell Phone and with 2.0, which was also published by ISTE in 2013. And like I said earlier, there was also the book I picked, Learning First, Technology Second, The Educator's Guide to Designing Authentic Lessons, which came out, like I said earlier, in 2017. The primary emphasis of this book is kind of trying to explain how educators can implement technology in their classrooms effectively. So part two is my summary. So the main focus of this book was on the EEE framework, which consists of the 3 E's: engagement, enhancement, and extension. Other important information to note is that, yes, there are different methods other than the EEE framework discussed in this book, but for this book review, I'm focusing primarily on the EEE framework because that's what the book focused on the most. And other info that kind of correlates with the EEE framework was how to measure it effectively, and also kind of how would you use it in the classroom. So here is my analysis. So part one of the EEE framework is engagement, which Kolb defines as students becoming active, social, and focused learners of the content goals. One of the things that I thought was very good to note was that on page 40 of her book, she says that engagement is not just about holding students' attention. It is also about shifting them from being passive to active learners in the classroom content and learning goals. I thought that was a very great quote, because I feel like a lot of people just think of engagement as, oh, you're trying to keep them entertained and grab their attention. But there's actually a lot more to it. Which then brings me to the 3 important strategies for engagement, which are social co-use / co-engagement, active learning, and time on task. And I thought that this book outlined this very well and gave some tools that even promote certain qualities of engagement. And so some of them include Write About, Poplet, Soundtrap, Space Deck, Pear Deck, Draw Time and Story Time by Kendoma, and practically any of the G Suite applications such as Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Sheets. Next up in part 2 of the EEE framework is enhancement, which is defined under 3 areas of improvement. You have operational improvement, which has to do kind of just with flexibility and being more flexible when it comes to your students' learning and the educator teaching. Then you have quantitative change in learning, which has to do with the exponential increase in students' test scores, for example. And then you have the qualitative change in learning, and that's pretty much providing a meaningful understanding on the content that's also deeper and makes students connect with it more. And one thing to note is that there are 2 important strategies to consider when you're dealing with enhancement, and that's having to do with scaffolding and adding value beyond traditional school tools. Also, Kolb did list some tools that convey enhancement, and some of these include Classkick and Formative, Kaizena, Imagistory, Google My Maps, and Tween Tribune. It's kind of important to note that most of the tools provided by Liz Kolb will fulfill most content areas, but some are specific to certain content areas. So it's important to make sure that you're paying attention to what you're using and what you're researching. Lastly, you have part 3 of the EEE framework, which is extension. And extension is pretty much meaning that you're wanting students to learn more deeply and also have more meaningful content that can apply to them, not only in the classroom, but to real-world problems. And Kolb lists 3 strategies that kind of help with extension, which are allowing students to learn 24/7, bridges everyday experiences with school learning, and everyday soft skills. One thing that really stood out to me too in this section was that on page 71, Kolb wrote that learning happens best when it is situated in culture, language, context, and time. And that really stuck out to me because I feel like some teachers don't recognize that the lesson doesn't only have to be meaningful to them, but also for the students. Because the students will remember more if they can relate the info to their own personal lives. Some tools that Kolb gave that promote extension include the Wild Lab, Sepia Town, Figment, Goose Chase, Click a Clue, Lab4U, Google Hangouts, Twitter, and Skype. And like I said earlier, some content areas are portrayed more than others when using certain apps, but a lot of these apps listed do cover all content areas. So I guess the only question is the EEE framework reliable? I would say that for the most part, it is. Obviously, there's going to be some flaws with regards to each aspect of the framework, but it would definitely be something that I would use in my classroom. Just some of the flaws mainly just had to do with the question of if technology is being implemented in the classroom, will students be distracted easily? For example, some schools partner with Apple and do the one-to-one program, where students will get iPads, and so will the faculty, and then they turn it in after 4 years, once they graduate. They tried this experience at my high school, and I really did enjoy it. There were some people that were misusing their devices, but other than that, it was a great experience. I thought that it was a lot easier because some people don't have access to certain devices, and it just was a lot easier to be able to have my books digitally and not have to pay so much money for textbooks. So in summary, the Triple E framework is a method that consists of engagement, enhancement, and extension. And you can find out whether your lesson plan or applications that you're using in your classroom work with the Triple E framework. I have listed the link to the website below where you can find the evaluation. But as you can see in the picture on this slide, it kind of goes over the questions of what you need to look for when you're implementing the Triple E framework. So, for example, one of the questions was, does the technology tool aid students in developing or demonstrating a more sophisticated understanding of the content? Extend, for example, does the technology create opportunities for students to learn outside of their typical school day? And engage, does the technology motivate students to learn and to start this learning process? Lastly, I have my conclusion. So, the main theme is to make sure that students are getting that meaningful lifelong learning and that they'll be able to take this with them outside of the classroom. Also, out of everything that was in this book, I felt like the positive outcomes outweighed the negative outcomes in this book. So for the negative outcome, I would say that one of the only outcomes of that would be that there could be bad habits to come in the future if there's exposure to technology. Positive outcome, on the other hand, would be implementing technology at a young age could pave the way for the future. There's jobs being made day by day, and you never know what's going to come. And with the advancement of technology going at this very big exponential rate, who knows what will happen? And another positive outcome is that students will more likely be able to remember the content when they're able to experience it through technology by expressing their ideas through it, and also being able to pair it with past experiences. Lastly, for strengths and weaknesses, the strengths definitely outweighed the weaknesses, but I would say that overall this book was very well rounded, and it had great use of examples, many different scenarios listed throughout the book to explain whether the Triple E framework was being used properly and whether each component was being used properly. The explanations were very thorough of each component of the Triple E framework, and the implementations of it were great. The only weakness was that I feel like there were some areas that were very lengthy and then some areas that were getting straight to the point. Lastly, I guess the big question is, would I recommend this book? I would 10 out of 10 recommend it to anyone who is wanting to go in the route of teaching. Because like I was saying earlier, technology at the rate it's going is literally our future. You're seeing more and more smart cars, even glasses now that are allowing you to view screens like the internet, and smart TVs. Then you have Apple, the company itself, going at this fast rate. They're constantly coming up with new ideas in technology. which thus is proving overall why technology is taking over our world. And so, if you're wanting to become a teacher, I would read this book. Like, I would recommend you to read this book. It was a really great book. Thank you.